There was no Sonic game in recent memory that I had more confidence in being good than Sonic Superstars. While growing up, the Sonic games I was most cognitive with the release cycle for were Lost World, Boom, Forces. Not a great track record. And while most of my worries came from seeing pre-release stuff that contained an abundance of strange visuals, lacking gameplay, or whatever the hell Lost World was trying to do, from the beginning, I thought Superstars would be a slam dunk, which made it the perfect opportunity for them to burn me again. Sonic Superstars is not a Sonic Boom. It is not a Sonic Forces. It is not an experience devoid of fun. However, I think it is a joke that this game was released in the state it was, with the content it contained, all sold to you with a price tag of $60. Could have bought me like, well, okay, it doesn't get you much, but that's still a lot of money. That's a bold start to a video. Would you be shocked to then hear I don't even think this game is that bad? But I think it is a travesty that this was Sega's attempt at another 2D classic Sonic game, especially after how fantastic of an experience Mania was. In a lot of ways, it feels like a devolution, a confusing mess of a game that doesn't even really know what it wants to be. Is it a follow-up to the classics of yesteryear? A continuation from the renaissance started by Mania? Something entirely new focusing its attention on a multiplayer experience aimed at families? Sonic Superstars has an identity problem that should have been figured out, any time before its release. Again, there are good qualities to it, many aspects I love a lot. I don't even feel that strongly about my dislike towards it, but at the same time, it doesn't make me feel much of anything, and I think that's worse in a way than if it were another train wreck. And it's not due to a lack of trying, more so a lack of focus and intent behind their decisions and a willingness to go all in with any given direction. And so today I felt it appropriate to finally get to the bottom of how I feel towards Sonic Superstars, to describe why I think it is so fundamentally flawed to its core, and how I think it is criminal that Sega felt as if they could get away with selling this for the price they did. The same price as Sonic Frontiers, no less. This is Sonic Superstars. Insert final title here. Oh, god damn it. You know what I do have full confidence in, however? My brand new standing desk by Flexispot. This video is sponsored by Flexispot. Being someone who spends 90% of their day working at a screen, I knew all about the importance of having a good workspace. So what could be better than an E7 Pro standing desk? There's this easy-to-use keypad that allows you to automatically change the height to whatever you want, allowing you to comfortably stand as you work so you don't get, scoliosis or something. This thing is sturdy, too. Not only does it not wobble easily, but it can also carry a ton.
This is high.
Yeah.
Where does it stop? My God.
It's a standing desk, dude.
I didn't think it would be that high.
I've loved having this thing. It has been a great addition to my working environment. I got like 2 more as well. I'm gonna fill my house with these things. So if you were looking for an excellent desk at an affordable price, check out Flexispot in the description below. And get more savings by using the exclusive promo code provided in the description as well. And thanks to Flexispot for sponsoring this video. Also, to address why the game looks like it's running on a microwave, I'm gonna be talking exclusively about the Switch version. Why? Because it's the one I bought. As far as I'm aware, the graphical downgrade is the only difference between it and the others, and I really did not feel like spending another $60 on this game. If you want to argue I can't speak on it due to not playing the highest quality version, I would like to retort that Sega still released this for the same price. I guess let's start with that. This game looks abysmal on Nintendo Switch. Usually, I can accept a graphical downgrade for lower grade consoles. Frontiers had the same thing. So does literally every multi-platform game put in the Switch. But Jesus, it really seems like some developers struggle when it comes to porting their shit over, not having the time or budget to optimize it as best they can. Because my god, sometimes Superstars looks inexcusable for having come out in 2023. The year of our Lord and Savior, no less. Especially considering we're having Generations re-released on the console later this year, and the classic Sonic graphics in that compared to this are night and day. Golden Capital, Press Factory, Amy's Act in Lagoon City, all particularly bad. Especially when it comes to the background. Seems like the issue comes from them not adding the blur to background elements, a feature I'd argue they use as a crutch in the other versions to disguise how barren and ugly they look. But again, even if that's not present in other versions, I have to say it's still very telling that they're willing to put out the game looking like this on a platform that not only hosts a vast majority of Sonic fans, but also a platform hosting its biggest piece of competition for the time frame it came out in. It's pretty laughable. The models are incredibly pixelated, stages vary from packed with detail and vibrant to empty and dull. I don't mind them going back to this more simple aesthetic. I know a lot of folks aren't happy with classic Sonic being treated as Sonic for babies with the Fisher-Price badniks with those big ol' eyes. With them hoping the return of series creator Naoto Oshima would bring the franchise back to its roots of the abstract realism most present in Sonic 1 and Sonic CD. But I think in Superstars, it's like, fine. The absolute bare minimum for me. I think this is the way a classic Sonic game should have been looking when Sonic 4 was coming out, but having it 13 years later works just as well, I suppose. Maybe a decade from now we can finally get to Nintendo's level. It doesn't go too far in one direction, but even then I believe that contributes further to the greater overall problem with the game. Not having a clear goal in mind. I think that most of all is what makes me feel so bored and uninvested while playing. Frontiers goes too far in the realistic direction, but it at the very least commits to it. Whereas Superstars comes off like it doesn't know what it's aiming aesthetically for. And so it ends up appearing very safe and corporate. There's no style. What does it look like? Well, a classic Sonic game. The most basic definition of classic Sonic possible. And for some, that's good enough. There are a few zones in here that I think look good. Great even. Bridge Island, Speed Jungle, Cyber Station all come to mind. But not only are the first two of those at the very beginning of the game, but even they feel extremely hindered by the hardware. I think if Sega wants to continue with their goal of making Sonic a AAA franchise again, that can stand toe-to-toe with the big dogs, then they're gonna have to adopt some serious quality control measurements to ensure something this graphically low quality doesn't release in a state like this ever again. Also, why is the art book a separate application? Yeah, friends, let's all come over to my place and play some Sonic Superstars art book. The presentation all around is just lackluster. Special shoutouts to the sound mixing, I don't know what the fuck happened there. It's a bizarre hodgepodge of new and old. Some sounds are ripped directly from the classics, the menu and stage clear effects are taken from Mania. Some sound as if they're coming straight from freesoundeffects.com, with no consideration as to how all of these would blend together. Some levels like Golden Capital Act 1 or Frozen Base Act 2 are completely ruined because of the terrible sound mixing. This is an overall issue with the game's soundtrack as well, but we'll leave that for later. As I want to ask a question for those of you who have actually played Sonic Superstars. Could you describe to me its story? Like, the things that happen? Because I don't even think that Sega knew what the hell was going on here. Based on all the marketing, you would assume they were going for something a lot more ambitious than the Genesis games or even Mania. Releasing prequel comics, an entire animation that looks better than the actual intro to the thing. But if you were to try and attempt to dissect the story of Sonic Superstars to me, and I do say attempt because it's not something that's made very clear throughout the game despite, again, the animated cutscenes and prologue short on YouTube trying to convince you that it's something worth paying attention to, then you would come to discover that it's next to non-existent. Now, is the story of a classic Sonic game that important? No. But I believe it to be emblematic of a bigger problem Superstars has. And it's that this entire game feels underbaked, like they had just enough laid out to put out a functional game, but not enough for any of it to feel fleshed out, that it was given the time to actually develop beyond the base. The game opens fine. You get a short little animation giving you everything you need to know. This adventure sees Dr. Robotnik searching for an elusive dragon thing, having enlisted the help of Fang the Hunter, along with a newcomer, Trip the Sun Geezer. And also, Sonic and Tails are chasing after Eggman even though we don't really know what he plans on doing with this unnamed beast. You know, usually with these Monster of the Week plots in Sonic, we've gotten some kind of idea as to what this creature is and what its power holds. You know, it's Chaos, the god of destruction! Or we see Dark Gaia fucking split the entire world into pieces and he goes, "It's just as the Gaia manuscripts foretold!" We even get a quick little line about Eggman's motivation, you know, Robotnik/Eggman Land being the end goal. Here, I don't know, something to do with giant inflated animals, I guess. One thing I will give them is that I appreciate the added details that when you're starting your campaign exclusively as Knuckles or Amy, each of them get their own short intro showcasing how they get caught up in all this. Doesn't really go much beyond they see Sonic and Tails and decide to tag along, but hey, they didn't need to do that, so thanks. From there, the story occasionally progresses through these small vignettes that showcase some sort of development happening. Except there's never really any development. The only thing you could call progression in this story is showcasing Trip getting abused by Fang more and more until a boss fight with him way later causes her to switch sides, absorbing the Chaos Emeralds and turning into the assumed dragon Eggman has been hunting for. However, in the main campaign, this has no real ending. Once you get to the final boss and put a stop to Eggman, things just unceremoniously end, cut to credits. And that's where you realize they've adopted this Sonic Adventure era story structure where you now unlock Trip's campaign, which aims to expand on what came before. Instead of showing us her side of events working alongside Eggman, this takes the Sonic 3 approach, where we get to see Trip get caught up in her own adventure directly after the events of the game, with Eggman similarly being replaced by Egg Robos and even ending in a one-on-one fight with Fang. Talk about you later. After beating this story, we're then given the last campaign, which randomly has this giant-ass purple dragon erupt from the ocean to, I guess, destroy the planet. Again, they were never very explicit about this. At this point, Sonic goes super, defeats the thing solo in this cooperative adventure, and that's it. Great. Overall, the elements are here for an, at the very least, decent Sonic story. But my biggest issue is that they're still attempting to get away with the same presentation they were doing back in 1994. Superstars doesn't feel like any sort of evolution on classic Sonic for the modern age. There's no attempt to do anything that isn't considered the bare minimum. Like, sure, the presentation isn't far off from the classics, but they did that out of necessity. This was considered groundbreaking at the time. Not to mention, the Sonic 3 and Knuckles plot was simply way more easy to grasp. You had 3 heroes and 1 bad guy versus the 4 heroes and 3, plus surprise bad guy as superstars. It's just too much for what they were willing to do. It wasn't even thought through very well. Like, they clearly wrote this part in where Trip uses all the Chaos Emeralds to turn into this dumb dragon form. However, they forgot to realize that their game mechanics revolve around gathering the Chaos Emeralds. There's no telling how many the player could have at this point, so how do they get around it? Well, they just fucking give them to you, but only in an optional side mission as Knuckles. If you skipped right past this level, which is very easy to do, you would never know that he found your missing emeralds just sitting in a pot or something. But then, because again, their gameplay puts a lot of focus on getting these emerald powers, they just take the ones you find back from you next level. They didn't even attempt to have a story reason for this either, they're just suddenly gone again. Apparently, there's way more to Superstar's story that lies between the lips of Ian Flynn, who's been getting gradually more and more involved in bigger Sonic projects like this. But I guess Sega just won't let him elaborate on it. Why? I don't know. But it sure as hell mustn't be that important if they didn't even bother putting it in the game. There must have been some serious time or budget constraints here, because it really is unacceptable to try and pass off something like this today. Mania got away with it because of its bare-bones plot and relying on the fact that it was a throwback. Also, Mania was $20. But such a major focus in Superstars seems to be taking classic Sonic out of that pixelated, so retro lens he's looked at as. Make him stand on his own away from the nostalgia. But ironically, I think that's the main thing holding the game back. And that can be seen nowhere more than with the gameplay, where, again, it seems as if they couldn't make up their mind on what they wanted this to be before, well, they shipped it. A major selling point for a lot of people was the controls, how would it compare to the originals? That shouldn't be a selling point, but it seems to be something Sega frequently struggles with. But after porting over the Mania physics, everyone was happy to report that it's pretty one-to-one. With most bad Sonic games, you can usually see the nugget of a good idea buried beneath the rushed development and mismanagement by Sega, but Superstars doesn't have that same problem. It's relatively polished. I think its worst trait just might be the sound mixing and multiplayer mechanics. Nothing too egregious, if they didn't advertise this as a multiplayer game, but what later. If anything though, I think they play it too safe here. There's an idea here for a super fun and engaging 2D Sonic game buried beneath Sega's fear of diverting too much from what people expect out of classic Sonic, even if what they expect directly clashes with their game's concept. And it sucks because I actually think Sonic Superstars has a great opening, fantastic even. I really love the first couple zones in this game, and if they kept up that kinda momentum, wink, I think I would've came out of this at least thinking it was better than Sonic 1 at least, not hard to do. But when looking at the overall package, I think Superstars suffers from a death from 1,000 paper cuts. Too many little things building up over time that make this a pain to revisit after the first few opening acts. So let's talk about them. Bridge Island is one of the most fun opening acts to any classic Sonic game in my opinion. It is wonderful. Not only do I love the aesthetic, being a more beachy take on Green Hill, feeling like a combination between it and Neo Green Hill from Sonic Advance. And even better, they went through the trouble of giving its second act something unique to stand out, that being it takes place at sunset, which looks fantastic. I think what I like so much about the look of this place is how jam-packed it all feels. There's always so much going on, and that's completely reflected in the level design. Fun gimmicks like short segments of wall running, and it's very vertical-oriented. It's one of those levels where I feel as if I can play it 10 times over and have each one of those be a unique experience. One of the most underutilized features of Superstars would have to be these platforms that shoot you off into the background. It's visually cool and offers way more opportunities for varied levels, like an expanded take on Metallic Madness from Mania. but it almost never comes into play in an interesting way, and is more often than not here to offer a burst of short spectacle before getting back into the action. Something you may notice when running through a couple acts in this game are these fruit things. Just what are they for? Well, after beating the stage, you can choose to go to an elusive act fruit, which boxes you into an enclosed area and has you go through a set path collecting rings and medals. The medals are for the multiplayer battle feature nobody plays, and the rings are shiny, I guess? There is next to no reason to try and access these. The game gives you plenty of other opportunities to earn medals. My first sign of grief, however, comes from the boss fight that takes place in Act 2. Most Act 1 mini-bosses in Superstars range from alright to decent, nothing too bad. But the Act 2 fights, however, that's a different story. Also, I'd like to quickly highlight here that I was sitting there for like a minute going, sign of grief, is that a real expression or am I making that up? So I looked it up and my Google autocorrect immediately gave me this. I mean, it's not wrong. In Bridge Island's case, everything looks fine. Just a basic Eggman mech that you bonk a few times and hooray, you're done. But boy, is it a sign of things to come with how fucking long it takes. His invincibility frames between hits last way too long. Clearly because they don't want you spamming hits on this guy in co-op mode to breeze through it with no challenge. But they keep that exact same timing for single player too, meaning between every hit you have to sit around for like 10 seconds waiting for your chance to hit him again. It makes replaying any stage a slog, not to mention it's the last thing you do in a level before moving on, meaning it just puts a bad taste in my mouth and makes me not want to revisit any of these places. Speaking of, places... It's not as strong as the opening, but still remains a fun time with a theme not seen very often in classic Sonic. I think Jungle Zone from 8-bit Sonic 1 is all you can really compare it to. Another thing worth praising about Superstars is that I appreciate them going back to giving each individual act its own gimmick. Sure, they're not all gonna be winners, and believe me, there are some cases of it later that seriously hinder the experience, but I like the vision. I always preferred it when Sonic gimmicks were in relation to the level design and not his moveset. For example, here we have the vine bouncing, pole swinging, there's a couple segments in the dark with a butterfly illuminating your surroundings, though it wasn't very good. There's just one big complaint I have with the game that unfortunately starts here. We see it upon finishing the first act. Yeah, that's right, we now have the option of going to Act 2, or Act Sonic. A side level that is only completable as Sonic, locking you into a single player experience for a bit. Again, multiplayer game. This does not matter at all when you're playing alone, but again, from all the marketing, that is not the intended playstyle. They want you to have 4 friends here, so why have exclusive levels for certain characters? Does New Super Mario Bros. Go, whoa, only Blue Toad can play this stage? Fuck off. I just think about the arguments between siblings this is going to result in. You really think a 3-year-old kid is going to have the patience to sit back and watch their brother or sister play through an entire stage alone? Some of these go on for like 6 or 7 minutes. And it's not even like these are all that common. The game is so short that there's only 4 instances of them locking you off like this, 1 per character. So I have to wonder what the purpose of even putting them here was, because again, it's like they have a neat idea and begin implementing it without even considering if this all comes together to create a cohesive experience. Made even worse because there are certain zones here that only have 1 act. It's as if we have to sacrifice every zone having 2 acts in favor of others getting 3. It makes no sense. And don't assume the game is going to let you know about any of this, by the way. Figure it out for yourself. Because my main question when getting this prompt was, okay, so what's the right order? Do Act 2 first or go through Act Sonic, then get sent to Act 2. I don't really like going to hub worlds in my 2D Sonic, sorta takes you out of the immersion. And it's not even like this is a one and done thing, like I figure out the order and know how to react the next time. Because in Speed Jungle I went through Act 2 first and then did Act Sonic, perfect, it all flowed nicely. But in the penultimate zone, Frozen Beast, I tried the same thing, went through Act 2 first, but then it just sent me to the final zone. How am I meant to guess this? Now if I want to experience the entire game, I gotta quit the level, go back to the hub world, and run backwards towards the previous world. It's not even that big a deal, I'm more so just baffled as to why they set it up this way. Or just don't have character-specific stages at all, God! This is one of the levels that only contains a single act, so I usually forget about this one entirely. It's fine. I think it looks pretty dull and the way the fans are placed seem pretty haphazard, so I guess I'll use this as a moment to go over the special stages. There are 2 kinds in Superstars. The first are for medals and are pretty much just a worse version of Sonic 1's special stages. I don't hate them, but they drop you like a brick. I wish it were more floaty, and the rewards being a measly 5 medals doesn't result in me going for them at all. The second is the real meat, the reward being a Chaos Emerald. I also like that you can't get more than one per zone. In Sonic 3, I often find myself spending like 20 minutes in the first couple acts trying to get as many giant rings as I can, which disrupts the pacing a lot. I really enjoy the special stages here in concept, using momentum to swing yourself closer and closer towards the emerald. But in execution, it is super clunky. The physics here suck, and there's no way of directing what you want to latch onto. Just aim in the general direction and hope for the best. You know what they should have looked at? Crumble. Really good indie game. Don't even need to do anything else, just look at this gameplay. I imagine if that were Sonic. Pretty sweet, right? Oh yeah, sometimes also a little wormhole thing will open up in a level where if you run back and jump in it, it'll take you to this short free-falling segment where you can get rings. Again, they don't get you anything. The reward for obtaining a Chaos Emerald is one of 7 Emerald powers. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna rapid fire through all of them now because they're ultimately not that important. Glorified wisps that range from incredibly broken to, well, vision. Lets you see shit that's not there. Every time I remembered this power existed, I would equip it, never find anything, then proceed to forget about it for the next half an hour. Sweet. Water is super situational, letting you swim or ride up waterfalls. But when it's useful, it is fucking useful. I like this one. Bullet's great if not a tad broken, letting you shoot off in any direction you desire for like 15 seconds. Slow slows down time, which is only really useful for the final boss. Avatar would be a much better screen nuke if these bosses didn't have an eternity of invincibility frames between hits. Vine is the one you use when you've already used up your bullet. And finally, each character gets an extra move for getting all 7. Creatively titled, Extra. Knuckles, Tails, and Amy all get a near useless hit, and Sonic gets the homing attack. Cool. You also get Super Sonic for this, with the other characters becoming super powered. They're still allergic to the super forms. Not a huge deal, but again, if you want this to be a co-op game for kids, you can't be playing Favorite Sega. You think the kid that got stuck with Tails is gonna have a good time next to Super Sonic when all he gets is Tails, but more slightly yellow? I don't think so. Our mandatory casino level, given a bit more individuality through its second act, which focuses more on haunted houses. It's decent, definitely the last solid world in the game. It's a cute detail to give all the enemies little ghost blankets here too. Wish they did more stuff like this throughout. But overall, I don't have much to say, it's fine. Has the Tails doll too. Cool seeing him again, see in my nightmares, buddy. Despite looking atrocious, there's a lot to enjoy about Lagoon City. It feels like a Sonic Rush level. I mainly think it's drawn back by the horrible Act Amy. It's strange, I saw people say this was the best stage in the entire thing, but I couldn't disagree more. Amy lends a hand to Trip, which is meant to build their relationship for that eventual Eggman betrayal, but it's just held back by not being very fun. The fruit mechanic makes no sense. I don't know why they keep this tally here. I don't believe it goes towards anything. And all you do with Trip is jump. Amazing. They didn't even bother assigning a jump animation here, they just float up in the air. Which is bizarre because when you jump off water they have an animation that could have worked just fine. Why? Really just our mixing and matching names at this point, aren't we? Let's predict the next Sonic game, guys. We got Green Brain Zone, Starlight Battery, Twinkle Fortress. Another one-act zone, so it sort of comes and goes. Definitely wish that snake mechanic got more use. It really just works as a glorified escalator here. The only thing I even remember about this level is that I never want to replay it because of how terrible the boss fight is. I haven't talked about it much here, but the bosses fucking suck so hard. Again, they're all designed to run the multiplayer, so sometimes these things can go on for as long as the stage is. To me, Sonic bosses, especially in the classic games, should be simple to understand and quick if you know what you're doing. But here, someone could be the best frickin' gamer on planet Earth, yet they're still gonna have to wait a minute for Eggman to come into the foreground. How exciting! The Titan fights in Sonic Frontiers are shorter than this. To me, this is where Sonic Superstars falls off. Press Factory is hideous. Has a terrible theme and just not very fun gimmicks. Act 1 has this giant contraption in the background that when raised up fully will then quickly hit the ground, launching everything into the air for a second. It's to encourage you to be more conscious of your surroundings to ensure if you get thrown up in the air you won't get hit by anything. But that's so tedious! More often than not, I'm just getting sent up to an area that leads to a dead end, and so now I need to run all the way back and make sure I run at the exact right time, or else I'm gonna miss it again. The second is even worse somehow, with a constant looming threat chasing you in the background. Once this meter gets filled up, it self-destructs the entire factory. Not a bad idea, basically just a more threatening Sandopolis. But certain areas space out these reset buttons way too far. I constantly find myself getting stuck on these rotating platforms trying to wrestle the controls to make sure I'm actually reaching where I need to go. But if you mess up just one time, then you may as well just stand still and get it over with because the timing on this shit is tight. Terrible level. Sucks. This is the worst looking level to me. What is the theme here? A golden city is a cool idea, but there's no sign of life. Just mystic ruins and foliage. What is this the capital of? My dick? Yes, I like the sun on the loop-de-loop from the Sonic 1 concept art. But did you need to be as a whole stage around it? There's this neat anti-gravity mechanic I like, but it's extremely underutilized aside from the Act 1 boss. Then by Act 2 it just turns into an underground lava stage where you auto-scroll while riding a floating platform, leading you into a boss fight with Fang that goes on forever. You hit him twice and then you have to watch this whole recharging sequence over and over, it's so slow. I like that you can see him getting his ride modified for the following stage, but when you come back to this level, you just wish you could skip the fucking thing. Why would I ever want to replay this stage, especially with these grating as fuck sound effects? Our final one-act zone sees us randomly inserted into a cyber station, where by God, the game regains a spark of energy. You turn into these neat vortex versions of the characters along with all the enemies. They switch up the gameplay now and then too, which can be fun. It's like you play up until Pinball Carnival, black out for an hour, then come back to life for 5 minutes. It's only brought down by, again, the boss fight. It's too long. I love that the robot you build inside the battle mode is what's represented here, meaning you could have fights here with Metal Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, hell even Knights. But I don't want to play the battle mode. So it becomes this 4-minute marathon of endlessly running and waiting for the next phase. I don't want this. Take it back. I always forget this zone exists. It's okay. But word of advice, choose Actiles first. If you don't, you're skipping right past that shit. Which is a shame because it ain't a bad stage. Also contains a neat reference where depending on who you're playing as, the Eggmobile you use in Act 2 will reflect the game the character first appeared in. Why couldn't we have more fun shit like that? Also, now seems like a fine time to highlight the music in Sonic Superstars, which, like poetry, also reflects the overall state of the game. Extremely unfocused. The game has like 20 composers, and the fact that the demo shown just months before release still had Sonic 4 placeholder music leads me to believe there was some serious crunching going on here with the soundtrack. Some stages sound great. Some stages sound alright. Some sound like fucking baby toys. And some just speak for themselves. Kill me. What a terrible final level. It goes on forever, consistently taking me around 8 minutes to beat. And it having 2 acts is a fucking lie. After the first one, Eggman uses some time control machine that, I guess, was his goal here? To send everything in reverse. Damn. So Act 2 is just Act 1 again, but backwards. You have to do the entire thing over again. It's not good enough to warrant an immediate replay. It's quite unfun as a matter of fact, filled with bottomless pits and crushing platforms. Fuck you. The boss here also is just truly atrocious. Anytime I for some reason want to replay this game, I stop after Act 1. Nothing from that point is worth playing. It's just this gauntlet that goes on forever. He cycles through the same 2 or 3 moves for minutes on end. And you're just running in circles and circles until he goes into his second phase where he's chasing after you, breaking all the platforms, which are very easy to fall down, by the way. And if you fuck up at all in this 7-minute slogfest, then you are sent back to the very beginning to do it all again. Fuck this fight. If anything, I would say I prefer the Trip campaign over the Mian. At least it doesn't offer me the ability to have 4 characters on screen. It's a lot more focused because of their ability to predict how many players there are going to be at any given moment. 1. The only thing that trips me up about her campaign is that she has her own final boss in a similar vein, and it's somehow worse. This shit can go on for 10 fucking minutes. It's basically a clone of the Eggman fight, except you're on a curved terrain, making your jump constantly unwieldy, with various insta-kill attacks that can blindside you at any point. God, I don't even want to look at this thing. I'm getting damn PTSD flashbacks. I cannot tell you how many times I fucked up on that final insta-kill fake art. Fuck this shit. And after all this, you're met with the aforementioned big dumb purple dragon fight, which may be, by far, the worst final boss of any Sonic game ever. This took me 3 hours on my first attempt. I can beat it in one try now, but that's because I will never forget how much I had to ingrain this fucker's attacks into my memory. You're flying around the ocean constantly bleeding rings, which you are given just enough of to beat him. 1 or 2 screw-ups and you're done, just restart. You can dash, but it costs 5 rings. So don't do it. He's got plenty of moves that trap you until you dash out of them, so there's no point in doing it anywhere else, just save them. Occasionally Tails and Knuckles come in to aid you with rings, but there's no telling when or where it's gonna happen, so hope for your best, I guess. Did you know that if you touch them, they give you a ring bonus? Figured that out an hour or 2. I also heard Amy and Trip can appear here to give you some rings as well, but I've never seen it. This is a horrible fight. Give me 20 more rings, would've been fine. But by God, this shit is a nightmare, not fun in the slightest. And your last impression of the game is the Fang boss, and this one back to back. Talk about a horrible finale. I saw a lot of people defending this, saying it's just a challenge, isn't that what everyone wanted? But someone not liking something because it's too hard doesn't make that take invalid. It just means it's designed poorly. What a nosedive. Things started so promising, and believe you me, the last thing I wanted here was to call this game bad. I was so sure I was gonna love it. And again, there are worse games out there, especially Sonic games, but this shit is bad, dude. There's no excuse for any of this. Sometimes it can be fun, but select moments are so poorly designed that it doesn't make it worth the hassle. What's worse is, this is a multiplayer game, and not like Sonic 2 or 3 where it's an afterthought, something there but not encouraged. Superstars is being advertised as if it were designed around the multiplayer when that's just not true. What is classic Sonic based around? Momentum, speed, and exploration, I'd say. Every single one of these, in the way they were handled throughout Sonic 1 to 3, directly goes against a cooperative multiplayer experience. The biggest comparison everyone drew in the time leading up to this release was New Super Mario Bros. A Sonic version of that sounds like a money printer. Until you remember that the learning curve between 2D Mario and 2D Sonic is entirely different. Mario is the definition of pick up and play. There is no concern about giving your 3-year-old sibling a remote and saying, have at it. You run, and you jump, not that complicated. But with Sonic, there's so much more to consider. So much thought already has to go into a Sonic game. Now do all that while ensuring 4 players can have a fun time simultaneously. I'm serious, please do, because our Zest sure as hell didn't. And again, it's due to their unwillingness to deviate from the classic Sonic formula. Even on the most fundamental level, like the controls. None of this meshes well. Sonic can drop dash, immediately making him faster than everyone else, with Tails and Knuckles getting their usual abilities that Sonic doesn't, and Amy being gifted a double jump. All of these moves are constantly at odds with each other, the level design trying to accommodate everyone. But if you get even the slightest bit off screen, you're getting despawned. Time to call back in and hope I don't immediately go off screen. Okay, bye. Everyone's moveset should have been simplified. You can give them all something unique, sure, but they can't all be sending the characters in different directions like this. And that's just the controls. The level design is what sets its feet. Everything is veering you in different directions. There's so many alternate paths here, which would be good in any other Sonic game, but here, no! It's way too easy for you and your friends to get stuck on different roads, like that background and foreground mechanic I was telling you about earlier. It is so easy for someone to get stuck in the back while you're in the front, and so everything is just messed up from there. Your options are either to keep running and let someone go off screen just to respawn back in, or stop and slowly walk backwards to get on the same track again, only for the same thing to happen 5 seconds later. Doesn't that sound fun? As a way around this, they oftentimes try to lock you all in the same place, but this is through different gameplay styles that have nothing to do with Sonic. Sky Temple has random breakout detours, Cyber Station has its rockets and mice. They desperately want to keep you all together, but nobody took a step back to realize that if they're having to try so hard to do this, Then why make it multiplayer? Because it's a gimmick they can market the game around to try and make it seem more interesting. Who said that? If you want my opinion, a game like this can work. If you simply restrict everyone's movesets to being more similar, simple the level design to ensure you can easily keep track of all players, and just slow things down a little. Fortunately for me, this game already came out, it's called Rayman Legends. It is a much better Sonic Superstars, and it released like 10 years ago. That game is super fast and fun, focusing on bite-sized stages that revolve around a certain gimmick. Sure, you won't be going as fast as Sonic, but if you can get good, you can pull off some super satisfying speedruns here. There is no doubt in my mind that the multiplayer aspect of this thing was implemented halfway through development. Arzest thought they were making the next mainline classic Sonic game before it had to have this 4-player co-op crap tacked on, ruining the entire experience. And because of that, nobody wins. If they focused more on single player, that could have been a more focused and cohesive experience. If they focused on the multiplayer full on, it could have been good. We could have had something actually playable with 4 people. You cannot convince me this isn't the case, because otherwise, why would they have an entire campaign here restricted to 1 character? Why would they design a final boss that only Sonic can play? If I were Tails right now, I would be pissed. Does Wonder end by only letting Mario fight Bowser? Don't think so. In the end, what is the point of all this? Why spend all this time bitching about a Sonic game that realistically is the most 6 out of 10 thing I've ever played in my life? Well, I don't know. I guess it's less that I'm mad and more disappointed. This seemed so promising, and Sega charging $60 for it before release at least gave me the idea that this was something they were confident in, something worth the price of its competition. But it appears reality has set in, and Sega has had to unfortunately learn the lesson that you can have a hit film series, you can even make a best-selling game the year prior, but Sonic is not gonna sell on name alone. You still gotta make the thing good. Sonic Superstars didn't even underperform, it sold like 2 million copies. I think that's way more than this shit deserves. It just flopped in relation to Sega's expectations, undoubtedly inflated from the success of the Sonic movies and Frontiers. But at the end of the day, that's not because of the price tag or because it came out at the same time as Mario Wonder. People will buy a good game, and Sonic Superstars just isn't.